you going there, peeps? Phil here from MTG Kiwi Philosophy here again, bringing you yet another deck tech. This is a rotation-proof deck once again, and I'm going to try and strive to keep this rotation-proof stuff going forward as best I can, but sometimes some cards are just too tempting to bring in. But nonetheless, this is a new one. Here we go. This is my Dragon Force. Okay, so in this deck, we don't really have build-arounds. What we're really going for is synergy and value. So we're going to start off with no particular order with these two cards, and that is 3 copies of Lathliss, Dragon Queen, 4 copies of, and Dragon's Hoard. Now the Lathliss is a 6-drop, 6/6 flying legendary dragon. Whenever another non-token dragon enters the battlefield under your control, you create a 5/5 dragon token with flying, and it has pumpable. So it's got a beautiful fire breathing, so that's fantastic. Now the Dragon's Hoard is a 3-drop artifact that whenever a dragon enters the battlefield, we can put a counter on the Dragon's Hoard. It then has, we can tap it to remove the counter to draw a card, or we can tap it to add 1 mana of any color to our pool, which is fantastic for ramp or fixing. Now the fantastic thing I love about the Dragon's Hoard, it doesn't matter whether it's a token dragon or just a dragon. We're going to be getting those counters. And having a card advantage in a heavily big creature deck like dragons is fantastic for us. But let's start off with some of these lower curve creatures. And that is, we're going to go with 4 copies of Dragon's Egg. Now Dragon's Egg is a 3-drop. It's a 0/2 defender. However, it is a dragon egg. But whenever the dragon egg dies, we also get to create a 2/2 dragon that has fire breathing as well. So once again, the dragon egg comes into play. It triggers Lathliss. It triggers the Hoard. If we get the dragon token 2/2 flyer into play, that triggers the Hoard as well. So it's a double trigger off that. So that's pretty fantastic for us. Yeah, it's not going to do a great deal for us in the late game, but if we do have a Lathliss in play, then it is going to do some work, and we are still going to have card advantage. And remember, the multiple Dragon Hoards we have in play, the multiple card draw we can have as well. So there's always that. Okay, so let's move on to our next dragon, and that is 2 copies of Nicol the Ravager. It's a 4-drop Grixis creature, 4/4 flying legendary elder dragon, but when Nicol enters the battlefield, your opponent discards a card. Now that's each opponent, so pretty damn good for a multiplayer too. But nonetheless, let's move on. It has another ability. If we pay 7, we can then exile Nicol the Ravager and return him to the battlefield transformed, and then we have Nicol the Arisen. Once again, we have a Plainswalker that's going to be fantastic for our Dragon's deck. Now, Nicol has got 7 loyalty. He's got 4 abilities. So we have +2, draw 2 cards. -3, Nicol deals 10 damage to target creature or Plainswalker. -4, put target creature or Plainswalker card from your graveyard onto the battlefield under your control. Doesn't even have to be your graveyard. And finally, the ulti is exile all but the bottom card of target player's library. So that's a pretty massive mill, and that's sick. But you know what? If you're worried about the fixing for this, don't, because we're going to be going more of a black-red based deck, and we're going to be able to get our blue mana from our Dragon's Hoards as well. So once again, Nicol coming into play is going to trigger Lathliss. We're going to get that token dragon, and then of course we are also going to get that +1 counter on the Dragon's Hoard, which is fantastic for us as well. Okay, well let's move on to the next creature, and that is, we're going to have 3 copies of Demanding Dragon. Now the Demanding Dragon is a 5-drop. It's a 5/5, but when it enters the battlefield, it deals 5 damage to target opponent unless that player sacrifices a creature. So this is fantastic. Yeah, not so great if your opponent's got token creatures, but you know, getting this into play as a massive body and having your opponent either take 5 or sacrifice a creature is going to give you some sort of board advantage. Once again, this is going to be triggering Lathliss, and it's also going to trigger the Dragon's Hoard, which is fantastic for us. And the beautiful thing about this sort of stuff is that advancing the board is really important for a Dragon's deck, because we really need to be able to make sure we can keep a board presence, because having so many big bodies means lots of big targets. Okay, well let's move on to our non-dragon cards and pull all the synergy together so we can see how this all works out. Okay peeps, let's get into some of our removal, and we're going to go with 4 copies of Spitflame. Now Spitflame is fantastic for us because it's value and it's also synergy with all of our deck, and it's a 3-drop instant speed, deal 4 damage to target creature, and whenever a dragon enters the battlefield on our control, we can pay 1, remove it from the graveyard and put it into our hand. Now the great thing about Spitflame is that it doesn't even have to be a creature from our hand. If the dragon egg dies and we get our 2/2 flyer, it's going to trigger it anyway, and we pay 1 and we get to return it to our hand. So it's a great new renewable source of energy for us, and it's value. And like I said, we really want to go for that value and synergy with this deck, and this is a fantastic card for that. Okay, well let's move on to the next piece of removal, and that is 4 copies of Murder. Now I do love Murder. It is double black, but hey, we're going with a lot of double colors in this deck, and we do have the 4 dragon hordes, so it's not terrible. But being able to straight up remove a creature at instant speed is fantastic for us also, because we want to make sure we've got that low curve removal so we're able to get to our late game with our dragons, you see. Okay, let's look at a last piece of removal, and then we will move into our pseudo removal and some more synergy before we go into our land and our sideboard, and that is 2 copies of Lightning Strike. Now Lightning Strike's in here for the sole reason it's a 2-drop instant speed card that can deal 3 damage to target creature or to face. And we're going to move on to these next 2 cards, and these 2 cards are pseudo removal and also synergy all in one, and that is 3 copies of Angrath the Flame Chained and 3 copies of Ravenous Harpy. Okay, so Angrath is a 5-drop Plainswalker with 4 loyalties, +1, each opponent discards a card and loses 2 life. Second ability, -3, gain control of target creature until the end of the turn. It gains haste and sacrifice it at the beginning of your next end step if it was converted mana cost 3 or less. And finally, his ulti is -8, and each opponent loses life equal to the number of cards in his or her graveyard. Okay, now the great thing about this is that we're going to be able to tie in Angrath's second ability with the Ravenous Harpy. So we steal our opponent's creature, and then we can sack it, put a +1 counter on the Harpy, and of course the good thing about the Harpy, it's only a 3-drop, and it has that evasion, which is really important. And I think this is a way of thinning our opponent's board as well. So although we've got that reasonably high count of removal, this is pseudo removal, and it also means that we can steal our opponent's creature, swing in, and they more than likely take the damage. But the funny thing is that if they block, that's fine too, because we can sack it at instant speed no matter what anyway. So we're really holding the ball of this court at the moment, and that's fantastic for us. Okay, well let's move on to our next card, and that is 3 copies of Sarkhan, Fireblood. Yeah, he's a 3-drop Plainswalker with 3 loyalty. His +1 ability is we get to loot. His +1 ability, which is his second ability, is we can add 2 mana of any combination to spend to cast dragons, which is fantastic for Nicol. And of course his ulti is -7, and we can create 4 5/5 dragon tokens with flying, which is also fantastic for us because the synergy is going to be able to help us ramp into our big creatures, and it's also going to be able to help us get those triggers from the dragon horde as well. So this is fantastic for us. I really do think this card fits in perfectly with our deck. Okay, well it's time to move into our lands, and we're going to go with 4 copies of Dragonskull Summit, 4 copies of Memorial to Folly. We're going to have 10 mountains and 6 swamps. We're going to keep it real simple. Now the reason we're not putting any of the Sulfur Falls in our lands is because we're going to have that in our sideboard, because we want to actually synergize a lot better once we go to our round 2, because we kind of want to surprise our opponents with Nicol, because we don't want to straight out just go Grixis, because it's a giveaway when you know you're playing Grixis and Dragons that you're playing Nicol. Okay, and speaking of the sideboard, let's move into it. And of course, as already spoken, we're going to go with 4 copies of Sulfur Falls. Now, Sulfur Falls is in there for the sole reason that we're going to have extra fixings so we can cast Nicol more efficiently. And of course, that means we're going to have to go with 2 more copies of Nicol, the Ravager, which is fantastic for us. So it's about maybe changing things up a little bit and taking out our strategy of the Angrath Flame Chain and the Ravenous Harpy and synergizing a little bit more into the dragons and maybe a slight bit more removal. But if you're really into that sacrificial way of combat and dealing with stuff in play, we're going to go with 3 copies of Dark Dweller Oracle. It's a 2-drop 2/2, pay 1, sacrifice a creature, exile the top card of your library, and you may play that card this turn. So the great thing about this is, once again, if we want to take out the Harpy, we can probably put this in instead. It's a lower curve than the Harpy, and it's great late game, because the late game we can steal our opponent's creatures with Angrath and then sacrifice them, and then of course we're going to be able to potentially play something off the top of our library after we've swung in and dealt them some damage. So that is what's really great. Alright, it's time to move on to some removal for our sideboard, and we're going to go with 4 copies of Settle the Score. Settle the Score is a little bit janky. It's double black and 2 other, and it's a sorcery speed, but exiling a target creature is really good for us, and putting 2 loyalty counters on a Plainswalker is fantastic for us. I mean, let's look at it like this. We put 2 loyalty counters on Sarkhan, and then we're only 2 away from his ulti, and you know, we could even look at Angrath, and he's already -3 and he's removed an opponent's creature. Then we remove another one of our opponent's creatures and put another +1 on him, and then we neg him again, and then all of a sudden it's just like boom boom and the board is clean. And I mean, Nicol, he's even better, you know. His -4 takes him down to 3, and then all of a sudden we're going to be able to start reanimating other creatures, or even, you know, Plainswalkers. So Angrath's just gone to the graveyard from removing other creatures, and then all of a sudden we reanimating him, and then removing another creature. We've settled the score, and then bumping it up, and it's just so synergetic that this is perfect for our deck. Okay, well, let's move on to our last card, and we're going to go with 1 copy of Verix Bladewing. Now, Verix is in there for the same reason all the other dragons are in there, for that synergy. It's a 4-drop dragon, and it's really awesome. And of course, if we can afford to pay the kicker cost, we're going to be able to get those 2 dragons into play. So the first dragon is going to come in, obviously non-token. It's going to trigger Lathliss. We're going to get those dragon tokens. It's going to trigger then another counter. So we've got 2 counters there onto the dragon Hoard. And of course, we're going to be getting it kicked, and then we have Verix's token as well, and of course that's yet another token, so potentially 3 tokens onto a Dragon's Hoard, and that gives us a 3-card advantage at some point. And remembering, if we have multiple Dragon Hoards, that's multiple draw phases, so it's pretty fantastic. And as long as we can keep drawing into some removal, it's going to be really good for us, because we can nullify the field. Okay, well, that's it. This is my deck here from Dragon Force MTG Kiwi Philosophy. I hope you've liked it. Smash that thumbs up button, share, subscribe, get into it. I'll catch you on the flip side. Ciao.